Weather and the gods willing, I'll be bringing you an hour-long TV show each week, expanding the reach of 1800 online and Awake TV. I must remind you that this is your platform too, so if you have a viewpoint or opinion that you really feel strongly about and that you want to share on Awake TV, then you can send a 5 to 10 minute video to us here at Awake TV and get yourself on the TV. The only guidelines are no swearing and don't say anything libelous or anything that you can't produce evidence for. Other than that, tell us what's on your mind. And so, to the first story of the day. It's tweet wars and how humorless Job Centre Plus was humiliated by bolshy bloggers. And this is by David Henk. For the last year, an extraordinary war has been going on between the Department of Work and Pensions and some of Britain's tweeters and bloggers. The battle has been over the centuries-old right to free speech, to send up self-seeking bureaucrats and insult and satirise government ministers and the heads of private companies, profiting from public services. The row began over a year ago when the Department of Work and Pensions used Twitter's complaint procedure to lodge a trademark complaint against @UKJCP, a satirical account attacking Job Centre Plus. The application came from one John Woodcock, calling himself the Brand and Information Manager. His actual title is Senior Public Information Publishing Manager, objecting to the site using the Job Centre Plus trademark. What was extraordinary was his reasoning. Here's a quote from the document. The @UKJCP account has been set up with deliberate and malicious intent to devalue and criticise the work of Job Centre Plus. In addition, there are a number of rude and potentially libelous tweets aimed at UK government, elected politicians and heads of large private sector organisations who are committed to working with government on reducing unemployment. Not surprisingly, Twitter quite rightly rejected such a request, but the ministry came back, this time using a discreet phone call, specially objecting to what are called PTs or parody tweets, which were frankly taking the mickey out of Job Centre Plus, but were quite clearly linked to information that showed it couldn't possibly have come from them. Some were true. One was a link to an article showing Job Centre Plus back sending claimants to work at strip clubs and porn films, providing they didn't participate, which unfortunately is correct. There's been protests from bloggers and Twitters who used Twitter's appeal process to overturn the decision. The account was restored on February the 8th after 10 days. An official spokesperson from the DWP press office said, quote, "The changes we're making to the welfare system to ensure that work pays are important to many people, and we work hard to make sure claimants have access to correct factual information. We alerted Twitter to an account that was falsely sending out tweets claiming to have been published by our official account. It's for Twitter to decide what action is appropriate. We've not asked for any account to be taken down or suspended." An official spokesperson for UKJCP said, "I'm sure @DWP Gov UK has no basis to complain about anyone who does a parody of a parody tweet. Some of what was tweeted by me on the 9th of January was focused on letting followers know what DWP and Job Centre rights they have. I take the view the DWP-inspired suspension of UKJCP was not only to censor freedom of expression and criticism of the government, but an attempt to suppress the sharing of rights-based information." What's interesting is that I've been told that no minister, not even Ian Duncan Smith, asked for Job Centre Plus to close down this Twitter account. The idea that ministers, MPs and anyone running a big private business should be immune from rude comments or libelous views seems to have been taken by managers at Job Centre Plus's HQ in Sheffield. Sorry DWP, There is a very long tradition in this country, from John Wilkes and Liberty to Hogarth, Steve Bell and comedians like Mark Thomas, to poke fun and be rude and tear the governing classes apart. David Cameron is regularly portrayed by Stephen Bell as a condom. He doesn't like it and has complained to no avail to The Guardian. If MPs and big bosses don't like it, they should take out a writ and sue. But they know that under the coalition, the cost of a writ has risen to £1,600 and legal fees are phenomenal. And they know claimants aren't worth suing because they could never recover their money. That's why they would love the government to resort to censorship, particularly if they haven't even asked them to do it. Now, Unison has joined a number of charities to condemn the government, community work placements, and in its new Help to Work scheme, which began this week. The new rules make it compulsory for a long-term claimant to either do intensive coaching, meet an advisor every day, or carry out a community work placement for up to 6 months. The community programme requires people to take on unpaid community-based work experience of up to 30 hours each week. It is wrong for the government to use the voluntary and community sector to implement its punitive benefits regime, commented Unison General Secretary Dave Prentice. Imposing slave labour schemes on the charity sector while slashing budgets will only encourage a reduction in the skilled voluntary and community workforce. The move also ignored the good practice established in the sector, replacing experienced paid workers and genuine volunteers, Mr. Prentice added. These schemes will do nothing to reduce unemployment or boost jobs and the economy. Unison has signed up to the Keep Volunteering Voluntary campaign, and those signatories have agreed not to take part in government workfare schemes. The union calls for paid work placements and apprenticeships with decent training and skill development to continue and to guarantee long-term employment opportunities. Support the Keep Volunteering Voluntary campaign. I'd like to welcome somebody who's been going through the job seeker system and who's been going through Workfare, which is a project the government have been running here, which it basically is just to get the job numbers down. So I'd like to welcome via Skype Tim Rowlinson. Tim,
hello.
Good to have you along.
It's good to be here.
Thank you. Now, you have had the experience of having to go on to what has turned out to be Workfare, although it wasn't sold to you that way, was it?
No, it wasn't. It was sold as an open day where you could go along and see what they're doing. But the only thing available, which they didn't say that it was, they said you might get a job interview at the end of the day, or you can see what positions are available. But what it actually was trying to trick people into signing up to a 4-week trial to get an apprenticeship at the end of it, and they didn't say that it was an apprenticeship at the end of it either.
Okay.
So,
now, as I understand it, what you were doing 4 weeks training, and then there was an interview that might lead on to apprenticeship, that might lead on to a job. Is that how it's worked out?
But that's only through going through their website, because the job centre really missold what it actually was. They said, go along to the Atrium Open Day, you can look at what positions they have available. Didn't mention anything about a 4-week trial or an apprenticeship at the end of it, but through looking into it on the company's own website, it was actually advertised as job seeker work experience, but the job centre were basically mandating people to go along to the day, because if you don't go along to the day, they'll stop your benefit. So I went along with an open mind, didn't know what was available, didn't know there was only this one thing available. They did a group interview, and then they pretended to choose people from that interview, I think, and then said, oh, we only have this position available right now, where you can do 4 weeks training, and there's a guaranteed job interview at the end of it. And they've been doing this since at least 2011. That's the earliest footage I can find on YouTube, where they've been, how can I put it, getting people through the job centre working for free. So it's been a long going thing, and
So this has been very much a rolling scheme for them, hasn't it? They kind of get
yeah,
people in for 4 weeks, so they get some work out of them. They'll ditch the vast majority of them
yeah,
and keep one of them or something, and then that person
and
will have
they're
an
up after
apprentice.
2 years. So
Right. So they have their 2-year apprenticeship, and then
yeah,
right.
which I think it's at now because, like I say, the footage that's on YouTube is from an event in 2012 where it was 100 apprenticeships within 100 days, which Jake Berry, the local MP, was promoting very heavily at the time.
So Jake Berry, he's what party is he from?
He's from the Conservative Party.
Okay, so
He's an assistant to Grant Shapps.
right. Okay.
So
So he's your local MP. He's been pushing this now for a few years.
yeah.
Why him in particular? Why has he been pushing it?
I think it's sort of a split-off company from where he used to work for. I can't find the link between it, but Jake Berry has worked in Halliwell's Legal, which used to be in another area. And then at the time that they were going out of business, the company in question got set up down where he used to be, where he used to work for the other company. But a year after he became the MP, they moved up here. So
Okay.
there's definitely been links between him and the company on YouTube, where he's been, promoting apprenticeships with the managers from it.
Right.
And
With
I'd
this one specific company, which is called Atrium, is that right?
yeah, Atrium Legal Services in Rottenstall.
Right.
So,
Okay. So this is who you were going to be working for. What was the job? What were you doing?
it was basically ringing people up, asking if they're over 80 or not, and then being told not to give them a chance to say no, advertising it as a free service, which is if they're entitled to benefits by the DWP. But it's not. It's nothing to do with the DWP. But the way they worded it made it sound like you came from the DWP.
Okay, so this was the
sort of
script
like-
that you were asked to read over the phone.
Yeah,
Right.
basically. And then you ask them if they have medical conditions, and then like asbestos or the typical, things that people have been advertising, hearing loss and stuff. But you ask them if they got stuff wrong with them, and then you say, okay, you'll get a free. Somebody will fill in the paperwork for you to see if you're entitled to benefit. But then at the end of that, they pressurise them into making a legal claim, so then that makes some money. So I went along to the day. I got most of the telesales in the room, but it was targeting old people.
How
Basically,
did that sit with you morally?
it was wrong really, because we were using a fake name to pretend to refer ourselves back to ourselves. So we rang up and we said, hello, it's Tim from Claims for Workers. And then at the end of it you said, can I refer you to Atrium Legal Services? But it was actually Atrium Legal. And the manager said, you're going to hear some stories about Atrium, none of them are true, it's coming from a rival company, and if you look us up online, all the stories aren't true, but I think they were true really. But,
Right.
So
Your
just dodgy.
Your experience just kind of backed up what you'd read or what you'd heard about Atrium.
Yeah, it did basically. So, if you're using a fake name to pretend to refer yourself back to yourself, then it's fraud really, and it's targeting old people and pretending.
This was something that was pushed on you by Job Centre Plus.
Yes,
you were
it
going to be
was.
sanctioned if you didn't go.
Yep.
So you were going to be sanctioned for not bothering old people.
Yeah, they tricked us into attending the open day where they took our photos to prove we were there, and they classed that as showing interest. So you can't get out of it that way. You can't say, oh, I didn't go. So then if you didn't take up the 4 weeks training, they'd stop your money. So that was that for a start. Then on the actual day, because the job centre weren't calling people and a few people didn't show up, I went into the job centre to say, what am I going on? And they've given me this letter here, which says it is actually a sector-based work academy. So that's come from an open day, but they've been doing this since 2011, so it's not, like a relevant new opportunity. But it says on the back of here, You must take part in all training unless you are told otherwise by the job centre. Meet basic standards of good behaviour, so that's open to interpretation. Like, say if I didn't get enough telesales in a week, they might say, oh, that's bad behaviour, and then stop your benefit, I don't know. Make sure you do things that you have agreed with your advisor, which I didn't even meet my advisor, I just signed. They're supposed to fill in all these sections, and they've just left them all blank on the form,
Right.
because they were rushing me in an hour before the day when I went into, before the position was supposed to start, because they haven't rung people, and people didn't turn up because they haven't been, informed.
Right.
So I don't know what's happening to them. It says you must continue to look for work and be available for work. So I'd still have to do my 2 hours job search a night, which is supposed to be 3 hours, on top of working a 30-hour week.
So that was what they were expecting you to do, was to work 30 hours a week.
Yep.
For no extra money, just
Nope.
benefits.
Yep. And then still do the job search on top of it.
Right.
Which annoys me anyway with the website the way it is, but
Because you have to log in and it tracks you, doesn't it? It tracks how long you search for, what you look at, how long you look at things.
And it was in the news that most jobs on it are fake anyway, but they're not removing them because they're saying it's down to the private company, like they always do, pass on the blame to Monster Jobs Boards, and then Monster Jobs Boards say, well, the DWP haven't paid us to remove jobs. So, and they're not terminating the contract because it was on Channel 4 News.
Okay.
Because they don't want to pay that money. Well, in the meantime, people are being forced to use a website, which is, they say they monitor it, but nobody's monitoring it. They're just passing the blame from one to the other.
Right.
And I think it was a third of jobs were fake, really. But
Right.
and then again, it says meet basic standards of good behaviour, but that's again open to interpretation. If you say, oh, I don't want to be calling people, then they might say, oh, you work shy, or I'm sure Estimate they'd say most young people don't want to do a job, but it's not about doing the job, it's about it being fraud. I've done working for free twice before. I've worked in a charity shop, and I've worked for something that used to be owned by TJUs, so I'm not work shy. It was just this one thing, which they've conned me into, which I didn't feel comfortable in. I mean, if it had been working in, Marks and Spencer or anything else, a normal, legitimate job, I wouldn't have signed myself off, really. But it says you must attend any interview you are offered for a job or an apprenticeship. So, I didn't see myself conning old people for 2 years at below minimum wage. I couldn't handle like one day. So, but if I'd declined, it would have gone back to the job centre. If you don't complete your training, we will stop your benefit, because it says without good reason, you fail to participate in the sector-based work academy, or you do not meet basic standards of good behaviour during your work experience placement. So it finally says it's a work experience placement. It's probably no job at the end of it. They didn't say that during the open day, or the way it was advertised on their website. Without good reason, you fail to attend a guaranteed interview for a job or an apprenticeship. This is from the job centre, so they knew the offer at the end was an apprenticeship. And it says your job seeker's allowance will be not paid or paid at a reduced rate, but it'll be not paid because you're not compliant. So
you morally didn't feel that you could do this job. Your conscience took the best of you. So
yeah.
How long were you there for, and what happened next?
I went in for the first 4 hours, and they put us on the phone straight away for an hour. They were offering £20 for the first person to get the first lead, £10 for the second, and £5 for the third. And I got the second and the third, but it was. I looked it up online. They say old people are too polite to hang up the phone when they get a call. So it was. They say speak fast, don't give them a chance to say no. Advertise it as free. But then I don't know what's happening on the other side of that. I'm referring them back for a call back tomorrow. What's happening, in their proper call centre? I don't. And it was wrong anyway. Even if they only had the slightest, like if they say, oh, I've got hearing problems or back pain, which is very common for old people, you can refer them to there, and then they'll give them a call tomorrow. So
you were just doing the initial cold calling. There was another call centre doing follow up. So what did you do then? So you did the first 4 hours. What happened after that?
basically, I came home and I read this letter properly where it said if you're offered an apprenticeship at the end, and then that dawned on me, obviously, it's going to be an apprenticeship, which it said on their website, but the job centre never told me in the first place. So
And
I was,
the minimum wage, the jobs for an apprentice is it £2.86? Is that right? £2.80 something?
£2.80 something, yeah.
Yeah.
It's going up by 10 pence in October, but they've knocked it back by more than that.
Right.
So,
So you decided that you weren't going to carry on with this, and
yeah.
you took further action. What did you do?
No, quite so sure what you mean here.
Well, you went and signed off, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I haven't actually told them I've signed off yet, but I'm just not, turning up, so I'm just doing it that way, and then they'll sign me off.
Right.
So
this has had quite a major impact on you, hasn't it?
it has, yeah, really.
Yeah.
Because the way in which they got us onto it, as you know, it wasn't as advertised. It was, making it out. And at the same time, before I just started this work fair, they said they mandated job seekers to go to a jobs fair as well, which there were no jobs there, and that really is how rubbish it is around here. So
there were no. You were
So,
told you'd got to attend a jobs fair, but there was nothing there, nothing available.
there was nothing. There was two local colleges there, the army, a local thing where you can get on for 4 weeks, and the rest it was all apprenticeships. So
Right.
I'm not apprenticeship shy, but I'm turning 25, so they're looking for 16 to 18-year-olds, so they get the full 2-year funding. They're not gonna. They say they will, but they won't take on anybody over 19 because in the second year of the apprenticeship they've got to pay full minimum wage. So the incentive is there for them to get 16 to 18.
Yeah.
So, but at the Darwin Jobs Fair, which happened before, which is a smaller place than where I am, there were loads. It was like 2 stories because I looked the photos up on Facebook. But there, it said 100 jobs available.
Right.
And they weren't jobs. The vast majority were apprenticeships. And, I was starting work fair on Monday, and I just thought, well, if that's all that's available, then, I haven't applied for a job around here. I have to go to, like, 30 miles away to find jobs to apply for, and 15 miles away on my job search anyway. But when I saw that, it was just like a visual representation of my job search around here, so I just thought...
So this really has been a complete flop, and it's obviously not working.
No, it isn't. Well, it's working for them, for the company and the job centre, because they've got you in a corner where if you don't finish working for free, they'll stop your benefits. If you don't take on the offer of the apprenticeship, they'll stop your benefits. Just whatever you do.
And Atrium get free workers.
Yeah, and their website says this. We now have a number of work experience positions available, but it's been going on for a good few years. So
one to watch then: Workfare and Atrium Legal Services.
Yeah.
Tim, thanks for your insight into Workfare. It's good to hear from somebody who's actually been through it rather than just reading stuff in the Prestitute media.
Yes.
Thanks for taking the time to speak to us today.
Okay, no problem. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay. I was going to say as well, it says it's voluntary, but you get kicked off if you don't do it.
Right.
So
Okay.
I was trying to find it, but
Don't worry, mate. Thanks very much for that. That's perfect.
okay. Hopefully I was clear in what I was saying.
Yeah. Well, awaitradio.us or Community Press Group at 6 p.m. in about, well, however long, and you'll be on.
Okay.
All right, mate. Take care.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thanks, mate. Yeah. 3, 2, 1. Tim Rowlinson there, somebody who's had what seems to be a typical experience of Workfare and of a local company using people coming from the Job Centre Plus as cheap, free labour. with the chance of an apprenticeship at £2.80 an hour, and then possibly a chance of a job at £20,000 a year. Possibly. Job Centre Plus are seeing their figures improve as they send people off to these work fairs and off to these companies. But it's not real jobs, it's not real employment. Tim has had that experience, and it's had such a detrimental effect that he's signing off completely. If you've got a similar experience to Tim, if you've been fobbed off by the Job Centre Plus or sent to a voluntary but compulsory jobs fair, let us know. Drop us a line, and in fact, send it direct to me. My email address is alantShearer@me.com. And now a story from our very own Neil Foster. Yes, the mighty Foster. After Neil was recently stopped for the 9th time in a row when travelling from UK airports, he had this to say about the current police state regime that it's now tightening its grip on the traveller. What would George Orwell have said about airport security and the war on terror? Orwell's quotes tell us so much about the future and our own apathy. He was well worth revisiting in light of the tyranny being imposed on us all. So this is by Neil Foster, and it can be found at thecommunitypressgroup.com. The recent reports of enhanced airport security measures at UK airports should come as no surprise to anyone on the 9th anniversary of the 7/7 London bombings, which killed 52 people and injured many others. The fear-mongering of the establishment over recent years to demonise Muslims and paint them all as some form of monstrous abomination of humanity are couched in language akin to that used in Nazi Germany to demonise Jews, or Rwanda to set Hutu against Tutsi, both of which led to the death of millions of innocent lives in brutal fashion. Every war, when it comes, or before it comes, is represented not as a war, but as an act of self-defense against a homicidal maniac. In both cases, the state played a major part in the process of demonization, firstly selecting and priming their audience before engaging in endless rhetoric across all avenues of the media at the time to ensure that genocide would ensue. War against a foreign country only happens when the moneyed classes think they're going to profit from it. George Orwell. The state is the only organisation, along with their military industrial complex mouthpieces, which uses such measures to stoke up the public opinion. That should make them go to war based on lies and deception to ensure that war ensues to the benefit of the rich and powerful, pulling the strings of their puppets in Parliament. All the war propaganda, all the screaming and lies and hatred comes invariably from people who are not fighting. George Orwell. Language is a powerful tool in any war, and we should be in no doubt that our government here in the UK is expert in such matters and in the use of language as a tool of mass propaganda over all media outlets at their disposal, but not this one. The master propagandist would be so proud of our current politicians. Joseph Goebbels would have been proud that his techniques are now being utilised across the world to engender a paranoid fear of all things Muslim and those terrorists over there coming to kill us over here because they despise our freedoms. Political language is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectful, and to give an appearance of solidarity to pure wind. George Orwell. Those so-called freedoms stop as soon as you step into an airport terminal. Having just had a look at the security measures already imposed on us by our democratic and freedom-loving government, it strikes me that the definition of freedom has changed over the years, with another of George Orwell's famous quotes being so close to the truth these days, where the only freedom that seems to exist in the UK is the government's right to take it from us at a whim to enslave us. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. George Orwell. When the government has the right to stop and search you, remove your property, take private information from your phone and computer, X-ray you, physically assault you whilst disguising it as a pat-down, or even strip you naked, you have no freedom other than to be a good, compliant slave, stay at home and obey authority. If you want a vision of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. George Orwell. The people who do such heinous work are the dregs of society, who are no more than Nazis disguised in airport security uniforms, rather than the black garb of the SS, the concentration camp guards, otherwise known as the Death's Head Unit. Neil's been stopped and suffered the humiliation of a pat-down in the last 9 times he's travelled alone, 8 times from the UK and once from Guernsey. It's interesting to note the wording on a UK passport. Quote, Her Britannic Majesty's Secretary of State requests and requires in the name of Her Majesty all those whom it may concern to allow the bearer to pass freely without let or hindrance, and to afford the bearer such assistance and protection as may be necessary. End quote. The trick in the above statement, which applies that I need to be protected from forces unknown and thus negating the need to search me for my own protection, allows the state to circumvent this using semantics by which they can insist that they are searching me to protect the right of others to be protected. However, there is no basis in law for violating one person's rights to satisfy another person's rights. However, I'm sure that somewhere in the fine print of the airline ticketing agreement there will be consent given in some form or another to allow this abuse of the traveller. This should come as no surprise when the political system and its allies being all in it together, so to speak, to ensure that the public are led down the road to total compliance with tyranny in every walk of life, not just within the confines of an airport terminal. Quote, In our age, there is no such thing as keeping out of politics. All issues are political issues, and politics itself a mass of lies, folly, hatred, and schizophrenia. George Orwell. I wonder what it'll take to make people understand that there is no freedom without the right to be free from a government should you choose to live outside its remit and duty to its public. They are servants whilst we hold the office of masters over them. We do not have permission to have them stopped and searched or groped by a perverted airport security goon. We do not even have the right to remove them from their jobs should they grossly abuse their position of trust or commit criminal acts. We do not even have the freedom to say no to such tyranny as practiced at our airports under the guise of keeping us safe. There's nowhere less safe for me than when I step into a UK airport terminal. I don't need terrorists of any race or creed to instill fear in me, when our government is doing a pretty good job of that already. If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. George Orwell. The vast majority seem to have been manipulated into the ridiculous belief that a hardened and presumably highly intelligent terrorist would attempt to evade security and get on an airliner with explosives. A few seconds of rational thinking makes this notion ludicrous. The public need to ask themselves a few simple questions to realise how farcical a concept this is. Question: why would someone attempt something when the likelihood of capture is so high? The simple answer is that they wouldn't. Question: are there easier targets? Again, here the answer is so simple. Of course there are. Ferries, supermarkets, shopping centres and sporting events, to name but 4. I'm sure you can think of many more. Question: who gains from an act of Muslim terror? The general public will automatically state that terrorists win in this situation, which is again a statement without any rational basis. Do you really think that a terrorist wants the US and the UK to bomb their countries back to the Stone Age? Do you really think they want their families and friends blown to pieces with drones and smart bombs, or their men and women tortured in horrific ways by crazed soldiers and their children left without parents, when the only possible benefit to them are the deaths of innocent civilians, many of whom in the UK are likely to be fellow Muslims? Question: who is fueling the fires of terrorism? Ask yourself a very simple question. If the UK was invaded by Iraq because they lied to the world that the UK was about to imminently launch weapons of mass destruction against them, would you stand up and defend your country? Or would you carry on with life as usual? I suspect that the vast majority would take up arms to defend the country and their families. So why do we criticise those who choose to defend their countries against foreign invaders? Western powers cannot continue to occupy foreign countries based on nothing more than a pack of proven lies told by Tony Blair and George Bush. These lies continue today with Cameron, Clegg and Miliband still voicing the same unjustifiable rhetoric to demonise Muslim countries. We've been told many times by many different UK and US governments that they will not allow terrorists to take away our freedoms and rights or destroy our democracy. We've been told that terrorism would not be allowed to win and that the war on terror would never end. Double and treble think is the order of the day. Double think means the power of holding two contradictory beliefs in one's mind simultaneously and accepting both of them. George Orwell. With the new security arrangements now in place, forcing us all to undergo digital rape by dangerous technology or physical sexual abuse at the hands of nameless airport security personnel who may have very dubious sexual proclivities, is another step in the road to total compliance by the state and those who control it, above the political puppets masquerading as our leaders. The only thing they're leading is a compliant flock of sheep who cannot pull the wool from their own eyes to see the idiocracy of the fraudulent war on terror and the system's program of manipulating the public mind to comply with a non-existent threat from a non-existent enemy. Political chaos is connected with the decay of language. One can probably bring about some improvement by starting at the verbal end. George Orwell. As mentioned earlier, that language is an important tool in the propaganda machine, which is used very effectively by the state. We need to take that language back and dispense with the manipulation of our language through political correctness, which is simply a weapon to control free speech and ultimately to destroy language as we know it, which in itself will help facilitate the further deterioration of our rational thinking processes, but only if we comply with it. A final quote by Eric or Arthur Blair, aka George Orwell, says it all really. We have now sunk to a depth at which restatement of the obvious is the first duty of intelligent men. My final question is simply this. Are there any intelligent men out there prepared to do their duty? The grip has today tightened even further with this story circulating today, Wednesday the 9th of July. It's now been reported that the restrictions on electronic devices that must be powered up for examination by the security staff at British airports are now being applied to any flights out of the UK and not just to flights to the USA. So, all passengers flying into or out of the UK have been advised to ensure electronic devices in hand luggage have enough charge in them as they have to be switched on. The Department of Transport, or DFT, said there could be checks on some routes into or out of the UK, but did not disclose which routes were involved. The US announced new security measures last week in response to a terror threat. American officials ordered some overseas airports with direct flights to the US to intensify screening of electronic devices. This prompted Heathrow and Manchester airports to advise US-bound passengers to charge electronic devices to be carried as hand baggage before travelling. British Airways said that customers flying to the United States faced being made to rebook if they were found in possession of an uncharged device. Alternatively, the airline also said that customers would be able to leave the device behind at an airport if it was unable to charge. They would then be asked to either collect it on their return or have it forwarded to another address. The DFT has now issued updated guidelines saying, quote, "In line with the US advice, passengers on some routes into and out of the UK may now also be required to show that electronic devices in their hand luggage are powered up or face not being allowed to bring the device onto the aircraft." The department said, for obvious reasons, it would not elaborate on the routes affected. Quote, "We will work with the aviation industry to minimise disruption as far as possible," said a spokesman. The UK has some of the most robust aviation security measures in the world, and we will continue to take all the steps necessary to ensure that public safety is maintained. It's been suggested the action could be a response to efforts by Islamic militants in Syria and Yemen to build bombs that evade airport security checks. As well as mobile phones and laptops, the guidance set out by the DFT also includes a range of other electronic devices, such as electrical shavers, travel irons, hair dryers, hair straighteners, and cameras, or any other camera equipment. So, some international news now. Obama's narcissistic delusions about peace in the Middle East. This is by Jonathan S. Tobin. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict worsened today as Hamas launched more missiles into Israel, including one long-range rocket aimed at Tel Aviv. Israel responded by calling up more reserves and striking back at the terrorists' launching points. But while the world reproaches both sides today, President Obama reminded us why he deserves a good deal of the blame for the mess. Yes, Barry Soetoro said, well, he has largely held himself aloof from the conflict in recent weeks, other than warning Israel to show restraint in response to both terror attacks and a missile barrage on the territory. But he did choose to contribute to an op-ed to the left-wing Israeli newspaper Haaretz today as part of its Israel Conference on Peace, in which he extolled the two-state solution and declared peace is the only true path to security for Israel and the Palestinians. Despite the boost from the president and the appearance of Israeli President Shimon Peres, the Haaretz conference will be probably best remembered for proving just how intolerant the left can be. To his credit, Economy Minister Naftali Bennett accepted an invitation to speak to the forum, but the leader of the right-wing Jewish Home Party was repeatedly interrupted by insults from the crowd of peaceniks calling him a murderer and fascist. As the Jerusalem Post reports, Haaretz has yet to file a story on the incident on its website. When he concluded his effort, dozens of people stormed towards him. While the minister's bodyguards fended off most of the attackers, one managed to get close enough to punch him in the back before he was whisked away. This is yet another reminder that for the left, especially the Israeli left, tolerance for opposing views is not consistent with their idea of democracy. But despite these histrionics, Obama's op-ed provided Israelis with a timely statement of how destructive US policy has been. Obama did extol the US-Israeli relationship in the same laudatory terms he used during his 2013 trip to the Jewish state. But he also went out of his way to praise Palestinian Authority leader Mohammed Abbas as a peace partner, while pointedly offering no kind of words for Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. Even more tellingly, especially in the midst of a crisis provoked by a Hamas terror attack and prolonged by the Islamist group's missile fire from Gaza, he also ignored the role of the Fatah-Hamas Unity Pact had played in torpedoing peace talks this spring and inspiring the current round of violence. This is consistent with US policy on Hamas in the months since Abbas embraced his erstwhile Islamist rivals. Though the PA government is now hopelessly compromised by the deal with Hamas, the US has decided to pretend as if Abbas's decision to make peace with the terror group rather than with Israel has no meaning or consequences. The administration blatantly violated US law by continuing to funnel aid to the Palestinians in spite of provisions that prohibit such transfers in the event of Hamas participation in the PA. It's also made it clear that it believes Israel should treat Abbas's new coalition as a viable partner in spite of Hamas's refusal to adhere to the terms of mutual recognition and commitment to peace that Obama repeats in his op-ed. What has this to do with the current violence? Everything. Hamas's decision to escalate the fight with Israel, both by sanctioning the kidnapping and murder of 3 Israeli teens and the subsequent missile attacks, is directly related to its belief that the Unity Pact marked a turning point in its long struggle with Abbas's Fatah. Though Hamas was forced to make a deal with Fatah in large measure because of its cash shortages and isolation after its break with Iran and the fall of Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood government, it has revived its political fortunes by reverting to violence. If Hamas is allowed to stay in the PA without penalty and Israel is constrained by American demands for restraint from the sort of military offensive that will truly make the group pay a heavy price for its behavior, then its prospects for eventual victory over Abbas are improved. The slide into what may be another intifada, or at least another round of fighting in Gaza, is blamed on Netanyahu's supposedly belligerent attitude. This is exactly what many observers feared would be the inevitable aftermath to another failed US peace initiative. Secretary of State John Kerry's peace talks were acclaimed as a noble effort, even if the odds were always against success. But by raising the stakes in the region at a point when everyone knew the Palestinian leadership was unready for peace, he set the stage for a change for Hamas to interject itself into the process in this manner. Even worse, by deciding to treat the Fatah-Hamas pact as no big deal, the US sent exactly the wrong signal to both Abbas and Hamas. While Abbas was allowed to think there would be no price to pay for abandoning the peace process and embracing reconstructed terrorists, Hamas soon realized that it could literally get away with murder without the US blinking an eye or rethinking its determination to restrain Israeli efforts to deal with the terror group. The result is the current escalation that's damaged Abbas whilst allowing the Islamists to reclaim their status as the address for resistance against Israel. Barack Obama may not have wanted the current fighting to happen, and indeed he would very much like it to stop, but the administration's manoeuvring led inevitably to another blown up, that the ironic effect of weakening Abbas, the one figure in this mess the president actually likes. Well, that's been my first Wednesday broadcast here on Awake TV. There should have been some other VT, but unfortunately we weren't able to get that to work. But of course, technology being as it is, there's not a lot we can do about it. I hope that I will be back next Wednesday with a lot more. But we also want to hear from you. We also want to hear from the other presenters of Awake Radio, Shaziz.com, TheseChangingTimes.ning.com, and the many other networks, stations, and anybody else on the internet who's watching this, whether it be on YouTube or on the awakeradio.co.uk or .us website. We'd also like to thank the Community Press Group and Life Pulse News for providing us with the facilities which allow me to talk to you in vision. Not sure that I have a face for telly, but you know, I've got what I've been given. So if you want to get in touch with us, if you want to send us your video clips, 5-10 minute long video clips, which, as I said at the start of the show, no swearing, nothing libelous, nothing that you can't empirically prove, then get in touch with me direct, Alan T. Shearer at me.com. That's ALANTSHEARER at me, that's me.com. Send me an email, let me know what you want to talk about, include a link to your video or wherever I can find it, whether it be on YouTube or in Dropbox or any of the other file sharing facilities that are out there. Get in touch, let me know what you want, we'll have a look through it, and as long as you're not swearing, and we'll put you on air. We also maybe do phone-ins, call-ins, Skype-ins, whatever you want to call them. We spoke to Tim earlier on today, and it was good to have him on, and we will be speaking to him again. And no doubt I will get Ole Demagord on, and Darren will be back with more on his story of how his family were mistreated by the NHS in the area where he lives in Great Yarmouth. We played the first half of the interview on Awake TV Live, and that started back in the 28th of June. Did a full 3 hours. I'm going to be doing that once a month. So this is the first of a daily show, and we hope that there'll be more each day through the weeks as we progress and as we grow in confidence with the use of all this tech. Like I said, it's been an experience. We spent the day getting it together, and still bits and pieces don't work, but we get there in the end. So if this will allow me to do what I want it to do, which it probably won't, I should be able to play something for you just at the end here to take us up to the top of the hour, because John Solodis is coming up after me, and he's going to be live and direct from Johannesburg in South Africa. This truly is a real international network, and shouldn't really be typing, should I? But you know. So if we can get this live and up on full screen, please, Dave. I want to play you this. This should take us just before the top of the hour. Thanks very much for taking the time to watch, and I do apologise for the lack of graphics and the lack of other videos, but it couldn't be helped. It's just